Hello, everybody. Tracy Mrs. JDog Flanagan with you here today. I'm the co-founder and senior vice president at JDog Brands. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Tactical Treasures podcast sponsored by the JDog Foundation. Our podcast gives veterans, male spouses, active military members, military family members, and patriotic military supporters a voice in the veteran space to speak about their service, how they're affecting their communities post-service, and they share with me a tactical treasure from their past that has shaped their journey in their military career, business, or life. Today, I'm so excited to be speaking with Stephen Nisbet, who served nearly 16 years in the Air Force as a special warfare pararescueman and medically retired in June 2021. Stephen always had a drive and passion to help others, which made his decision to become a pararescueman an easy one. Stephen served in 10 combat deployments in various operating areas, including Afghanistan, Africa, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Over this period, Stephen lost over 15 teammates to combat or combat-related circumstances and has himself experienced mental health injuries due to sustained combat operations. He is now the co-founder and president of Shields and Stripes. Stephen's passion to help others is just as strong today as when he began his service. His personal experiences with PTSD and other trauma-related symptoms have made him acutely aware of those groups that are in need of the very treatment he received. Stephen identified a lack of mental and physical health support within the law enforcement and first responder communities, as his father is a 30-year law enforcement veteran. Stephen knows firsthand how these careers can affect the individual. Stephen's mission with Shields and Stripes is to change the way public service professionals are cared for when they sustain mental and physical injuries caused by the career path they have chosen. Hello, Stephen. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for your service to our country.
Thank you for having me. Man, it's like good. You read that really well. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So excited for our discussion today. But before we kind of get into everything, I would really like to know what inspired you to join the Air Force.
Wow. I wish I had like a really, you know, inspirational journey as far as like a story that would be really inspiring. But simply, I, I was born in Colorado, raised in Tucson, Arizona, and I went to high school or spent my entire childhood playing sports. Soccer was my preferred sport of choice, and that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. I was had ambitions to be a professional soccer player. Then, as I was in high school and approaching my senior years, and looking at, hey, there's no scouts or anybody really coming to look at my school for us, and we're not winning any championships. I better start figuring out what I'm going to do with my life in the future. And all my buddies, the guys that I hang out with, they got scholarships to universities specifically for engineering, and I just that wasn't interesting to me, but I wanted to hang out with them. So um, I was trying to come up with creative ways to follow their suit. And
Right.
what I enjoyed was astronomy. And I went to a community college because I didn't get a scholarship. I didn't have money to pay for a university. So I went to a community college for astronomy. And as I went there, I looked around at the people around me, and they were just a different demographic of folks than I was used to. So ultimately, I was like, I got it. Like, this certainly cannot be it. And my dad had spent several years in the Air Force. My grandfather spent several years in the Air Force. So I was like, you know what? Like with the GI Bill, I'm gonna pursue a job in the Air Force. I'm gonna do 4 years. I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna use the GI Bill, catch up with my pals, and see what I can do. Like see if I can make up for lost time. And as I looked at that pathway, went to a recruiter and took an ASVAB test and scored really well on that. And I said, what job requires you to have a high ASVAB score? And they said, a nuclear weapons apprentice. And I was like, sign me up. That sounds pretty challenging. It sounds exciting. And I'd signed paperwork, and that was it. That was my pathway as I walked out the door. And my life completely changed because of a individual, a recruiter, an army recruiter with a bad habit of smoking cigarettes. And he was smoking cigarettes outside. And as I stepped out, and he's like, "Hey, son, you want to be in special forces?" And I was like, "I've never thought of that. I will listen to what you have to say, but I don't want to be in the army." And so I listened to what this fella had to say, and I was like, man, that's really enticing. You even put money on the table saying like, you sign up today, you get $20,000 bonus. I was like, man, that's cool. So I went
Wow.
over to the Air Force recruiter and I said, hey, do you guys have special operations jobs? I didn't never heard of them in the Air Force. And they're like, yeah, but you wouldn't make it. So just stick with what you got. And I was like, can you just give me the information? And I took my contract, tore it up, and found out about two jobs, pararescue and combat control. And as I learned more about those, I ended up training for it because you had to take a physical ability and stamina test, a pass test to join that career field or join the special operations world. And as I took that test, they're like, "Well, which one are you going to take?" And I said, "I didn't know there was a different ones. What's the difference?" So one's got the swim at the beginning, and one's got the swim at the end. And I was like, "I'll do the swim at the beginning because I've that's how I've been training." And so I complete it, and he's like, "All right, you're going to be a PJ." And I was like, "Hold on, I want to be I was going to be a combat controller." And he's like, "They're the same thing. When you get to Indoc, you get to choose whatever you want to do there." And that dude lied to me. So I was originally trying to become a combat controller, but I ended up taking a test and then following a pathway, unbeknownst to me, to become a pararescue. So
Oh,
that
wow.
super inspiring story, but a story of chance and I told you so.
Well, I love that story. It's about destiny, right?
Sure,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
well,
clearly, yeah, you were meant to be a pararescueman. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Um, is there a particular aspect or moment from your service that kind of stood out as impactful in a positive way for you?
Ooh, that's a really great question. Um, I would say several leaders. Well, a deployment early on that so my goal was to do only 4 years and get out, and that was the plan. I really actually didn't have ambitions to go to combat or anything like that. Like I looked up the pararescue career field and I was like, I want to do humanitarian rescue because that was helping others and not harming others. And then as I did my first deployment overseas, it was the first time I had gotten shot at in Afghanistan. In the third day of the deployment, I got shot at, and I figured out, man, there are really people out there trying to kill me. And I was attached to a task force, a joint task force, and got to really see what they did at such a high level. And some of these things we were doing, although I was a supporting asset and watching what they were doing, and in case something went wrong, that's where we would go in and help them. But watching what they were doing was going onto the news, and I was like, man, they're doing some high level things, and just seeing them, I was like, there's no difference between me and them other than time. Like I'm just as big as they are. I'm just as fast and smart, and in fact, I'm smarter than most of them. Um, so that aspect, that deployment, gave me the confidence to pursue my career further and not get out after 4 years, and actually make it pretty much an entire career, and change my outlook on, well, maybe combat is the environment I was supposed to be in.
Right.
Maybe that's not a positive way, but that did change my life and then ultimately
Sh-
led to where I am now.
sure it did because you went on to serve for 16 years. So, um, definitely that was pretty impactful, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, so I would was wondering if you would be willing to kind of share your experience, because I believe your experience with getting out and dealing with PTSD has sort of given you the vision to be the founder of Shields and Stripes. Is that correct?
Yeah, the circumstances at which I experienced and which led to me getting out is certainly what drove my pathway to starting or co-founding Shields and Stripes with Dr. Jennifer Byrne.
Right.
Yeah, so after like you described there, I had several deployments, and just a vast, a lot of friends have been lost either to combat or taken their own lives or even accidents, and those I just never really had time to sit there and think and process. It was just like, well, the first teammate that I lost was actually at that indoc course, our training course for selection, right in the very beginning.
Wow.
He drowned, or I mean, he passed out on the water, which is not unusual um, for that selection course. But then he ended up having a heart condition, which led to him passing away. And so that was like my and that was the first 3 months in the military. And that was my
Wow.
first like teammate lost, and at that moment I was like, see, this is real. I knew this was going to happen. This is, but I'm prepared for it, and I expected it. And so I didn't really process it. Like I was just like, well, that like we're ready for this. And then as the years went on, I just kept losing more and more teammates and never processing it. So eventually, all of that boiled over into where I just couldn't remember people that I had known for 10 years. I had um, really poor communication skills, angry outbursts, irritability, nightmares, just sleep apnea, these types of symptoms. And although I didn't consider myself having PTSD by the what you see on TV and the movies, I just didn't. It wasn't that way for me. I thought I was normal and I was just stressed. And the most stressful periods is really around my children. My boys who were 9 and 11 at this particular incident, which led to my pathway of getting care. They would just fight with each other, really play fight, but then one of them would inevitably get hurt, and my life was revolved around death and defying death and accidents and terrible things. So all I could picture are terrible things going on in my mind whenever they are playing and they're roughhousing that one of them is going to accidentally get hurt and go to the hospital and then end up dying. So it would send me through the roof to try to protect them from each other. And
Right.
that stress, I'd rather get shot at than deal with them screaming and crying, quite honestly. And so the only way for me to control that environment is to get loud and aggressive, and that's what I used to do to control my children. And one day after a particular shameful incident, um, my wife had sat me down and said, "Well, I don't mean to make you upset. I love you, but your children are afraid of you." And so that was really the moment that I was like, "Man, I got to figure out what is going on upstairs." So leaned on the resources that are embedded within the SOCOM units. Special operations units have a lot of resources, much like the professional athlete world does. Strength coaches, physiotherapists, psychologists, dietitians, they're all working to keep you operating at a high level. I used those quite a bit on my way out. And as I started to enjoy my job again and attack these symptoms that I was experiencing, I was a team leader of my group, my team, and a bunch of rescue PJs and even a couple of combat controllers went out to do some mountain rescue operations or just some practice and training. And ultimately, one of the anchors that was set up for a rappel line, while one of the guys was on the rappel, ended up failing. So he was about 30 feet down on a
Oh
70
no.
foot face, and that failed. And so he tumbled down the rock face itself. One of the other guys, the guy that set up that anchor, was tied into the rope itself as that rappel was going on. So he was pulled off by the weight of the other individual on the rappel. So he
Oh
fell
no.
70 feet and impacted the ground below. Me and the other guys went down, treated him as best we could, but he ultimately passed away there. But that really impacted me greatly. Although I lost several teammates, in various circumstances, this one was very different. We were talking about where we're going to dinner that night. We're just hanging out. It's supposed to be a chill training at evolution before we take alert, and now my teammate's dead in front of me. Got a wife who was pregnant. He had a 1 year old. So that was just super devastating for me as a leader to feel the weight and the responsibility of all. So took myself off a team, leaned on those resources again, and then came back on the team. Went on a short deployment, did what we needed to do overseas, and came back. And the investigation for that accident closed out. And when that investigation closed out, they found that there's nothing we could have done to prevent the accident from happening or change the outcome. However, the DoD and the military wanted to or felt obligated to hold somebody accountable, and they held me accountable as the team leader and removed me from that position and removed me from the unit that I worked really hard to be at. So it's a top tier unit. That was the only place I wanted to be, and so I was given a very short period of time to pack up my stuff and move out of the state, to another unit. I don't want to say a lesser unit, but a lower tiered unit, and that was not an option. So, with the mental state I was in, I used those resources to come out of that depression. I pursued a medical retirement and ended up medically retiring out of the military. But as I approached that time, I started realizing that those resources that I leaned on, that quality of care that affected me, impacted me and my team so greatly, that was going to go away. And it was an anomaly. It's something that's only offered to these elite units. And I was going to be stuck really to the VA, which had notoriously at that time been pretty terrible. And so as I looked at my options of getting out, I didn't find anything, at least a foundation wise, that was doing the same thing that we were used to. So ultimately felt guided and pushed to pursue that, to pursue opening something up that would replicate what I had available to me when I was in the special operations community. And so partnered with a company called Exos, who typically works with professional athletes. They will provide all the physical aspects, and then we bring in the mental health professionals and bring our veterans and first responders into that one place, into a facility where they would get 3 weeks of physical training, physical therapy, dietitian consult, food made for them, and then the psychotherapy, and many other modalities of treatment. And then when they leave there, we continue that through a telehealth model for a 3 month total period. So we started it, 3 years ago when I first gotten out, and now we're going strong and helped. We have, although only 8 go through a program at a time, we include the family. So I venture to say about 250 or so estimated families that we've helped so far.
Wow. Okay. Um, yeah, that's really interesting. So where is the program located? Because I understand that I was on your website and it's a 3 week in person
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
tra- uh, a program that they come to initially.
Yeah, yeah. So the first 3 weeks are in person inside of those Exos performance facilities. So with that partnership, we work inside of their Gulf Breeze in Florida or Pensacola, Florida. We have
Okay.
a facility there, and then one in Phoenix, Arizona. And then ultimately, our main goal is to eventually independently operate and own our own facility. Not that we're separating a partnership from Exos, but we'll be able to affect and impact more people. We'll still continue to work that partnership with them. But as we open up a new facility, that is the primary client is the veteran and first responder, whereas Exos also has their clients that they work with, professional athletes, veteran athletes, and those folks. We want to be able to see as many of our veterans and first responders as possible.
Right. Right. I see. Um, so it's 3 week in person, and they get um, therapy, group therapy, individual therapy, occupational therapy, physical,
Yeah,
dietitian, nutrition,
yeah,
all of that.
all of
And then,
those. Yeah,
okay,
and they even stay in a nice 5-star resort hotel. We have partners with Therabody, Aura Ring, and Alpha Stem, where they get gifts given to them when they show up, so we can track. Instead of asking, "Hey, how was your sleep last night?" They're wearing the Aura Ring. We can look and see what their sleep actually was last night. We can track. They do a blood lab, so we know what their relatively what their cortisol levels are starting with and where they're at during the day, and then testosterone levels, cholesterol levels, all those things, so we can tailor their diet plan to what their blood is saying
oh, wow.
that
Wow, that's really great. I love it.
yeah,
Um, so, and so what's the criteria? Like who can apply? Is it veterans active duty or reserve or,
that's a great question.
um,
So all of them can apply, and they would apply on our website. If you go to www.shieldsandstripes.org, it's on the top right corner, little apply button, and um, that what that application does is it's an initial screening. Just think of it as like an intake form, and that would go to our psychologists, who look at that because there is medical information on there. So we're very protective of HIPAA privacy and whatnot. And what they're really screening for is symptoms that maybe were not the best suited facility for them. Maybe they have substance abuse or substance dependencies. We're not a detox center, and so we wouldn't be appropriate facility for that individual to come through. And we have partnerships with others that are detox centers, and we can recommend or help or guide them to that facility. Likewise, if somebody is in that application says that they're talking about taking their own life within the next 24 to 48 hours, that's also not us because we are a planned out cohort style program.
Right.
So that would not be a suitable individual to go through our program. And then several others, like whether it's a personality disorder or something that's just maybe they just aren't the right fit for our demographic going through the program, based off of how the psychologists, our clinicians have evaluated them.
Okay.
Well,
Hello, viewers and listeners. I would like to introduce you to the JDog Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the prevention of veteran suicide and the healing of veterans' mental health. 100% of all proceeds received by the JDog Foundation goes directly to several foundations focused on the mission of saving veterans' lives. Each partner is hand-selected by our executive director, Jerry Flanagan, with input from the assistant director, Tracy Flanagan, and the JDog Foundation board members. Our foundation's motto: saving lives, one veteran at a time. Go to jdogfoundation.org to take a look at everything that we're doing there and the organizations that we're partnered with. You can also donate, and there's also a support line if you're in need of help. Thanks. Check us out. jdogfoundation.org. So seems like you're dealing with strictly people who have definite PTSD. So what about people who have TBI?
yeah, that's a great question, and something that we're trying to blend, I guess, or change some of our messaging as we start doing more research. We've got a neurosurgeon that's helping us out and tying into the team and doing a lot of research on TBI. And it's what we're seeing actually is a lot of folks that were diagnosed with PTSD probably actually should have been diagnosed with TBIs. And what we're calling TBIs, I think they need to restructure how that's being evaluated and what's being diagnosed as a TBI. One unconscious one event where it causes loss of consciousness is classified as a TBI. But also, what about individuals who have lost consciousness because of hypoxia? For example, most of us in special operations do a dive school or a dive school prep. And in that dive school prep, you're holding your breath for a long period of time. And a lot of times you pass out underwater, like I have. That's a loss of consciousness. Your brain is losing oxygen, therefore it's a brain injury. Brain injuries can be caused by micro blasts from shooting a gun.
Mhm.
Be caused even just from minor asphyxiation, whether somebody's doing that in the bedroom or not. There's just a lot of causes of TBI that folks may not be identifying or self-identifying because they didn't have experience one large blast or they didn't experience a loss of consciousness, but they got hypoxic for long periods of time, like pilots going up to altitude. They're not receiving the amount of oxygen that they should be, um, because of the altitude. Likewise with skydivers. Um, so the short answer, yes, we are focusing on TBI, but we're also very much focused in changing our messaging from PTSD, but more to brain health, overall brain health, because we
Okay.
consider PTSD also a brain health issue.
Right. Right. Okay. Great clarification. Thank you for that. And how do you function on donations, grants? Can people donate?
Yeah, great question. So we typically for each program we look for sponsors to sponsor a particular program. It's an event, right? And that can be foundational sponsors, that can be organizations, corporations, those types of sponsors and donors. We typically work off of just general donations. People can go onto our website on www.shieldsandstripes.org and then click the donate button and either join as a monthly donor, recurring donor, or just a general donation, a one-time donation. And then we host different events, events all over the country, whether it's a golf tournament or a gala or some other fundraiser. And then we're looking at pursuing grants. Grants are a little bit tougher because of um, a lot of them, you have to fall within a specific period of time. They're very competitive. Um, the reporting instructions, um, there's a lot of red tape in there. But those are things that we're pursuing, grants that we're pursuing. and we're going to stand up somewhere. I don't know how to write grants. I'm not,
Right. Yeah.
those things are so ginormous. I looked at one and it was like, had to have been like 100 pages long. I was
Oh
like,
my
oh,
gosh.
how do people get through this? Um, but all of those work.
Right. So, Stephen, I'm sure that the cost for veterans and first responders, everything is free. Um,
Yeah,
do they
absolutely.
pay, so did they pay for travel to the facility or nope,
No.
that's all covered?
Yeah, the only thing they pay for is the stuff that they want to do on their own time. If they want to do something on the weekend, all their breakfast, lunch, and dinner is all made for them at Exos and paid for by us. Travel, so we pay for their airfare. We have a van, rental car van that takes them to and from the resort hotel that they're staying in. So that was one of the key things is, within the special operations community that whenever I did a TDY or something like that, or like on a big trip, I was there was an impression that was laid upon me when I showed up on my really my first TDY at this top tier unit, and everything was set up for me. Everything was already taken care of, and when there was a concierge that like service, that was just like, wow, I don't. All I have to do is worry about the thing that I came here for, which is to train. And so I
Right.
want to replicate that very same thing. When they show up there, they have to just worry about the one thing they came to do, and that's get better and put the time and the effort into doing that. And just take away all the distractions, all the stress, all the worry that's for somebody else to worry about. We're here to make you better. And so I wanted to replicate that.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point because I know part of traveling, just even as a civilian person, it's so stressful when you travel and,
Yeah.
when you're thinking of coordinating, okay, I have to get on the plane, I have to fly, I have to go to the airport, now I have to arrange transportation and all of that. I mean, that's the last thing you need to be worried about, right? Because you're coming to a place to try to, you know, have your mental health taken care of, and the last thing you need is stress. So
Yeah.
that's really great that you kind of take that completely out of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I got to fly out here later tonight, and that's the stressor on my mind because I don't get in until about midnight. I got to rent a car and go check in. Go up early tomorrow morning for training. So
Oh wow.
I
Oh
do.
gosh. Okay. Um, that's great. So this is really awesome. I love what you're doing here, and it seems really effective. And it's really awesome that you've been able to duplicate, what helped you, in your PTSD journey and your road to mental wellness, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I have another question for you, and it's the 64,000 question of the day, and that is, we are tactical treasures. So, Stephen, I have to ask you, what is your tactical treasure?
Well, I got a couple. One, um, in order for me to perform at that level, think of it at the top tier level. If you're equivalent to a professional athlete is, that's the top tier level for athleticism, right? Where I was within the tier community in the special operations world was equivalent to that. And in order to get there, it takes a lot of focus and determination and self-talk. I did a lot of self-talk. I encourage people to do that. I think a lot of professional athletes do that. There's a lot of sports scientists and sports psychology out there to be able to talk through to yourself about and your situation where you want to be, and give yourself confidence, and then also visualization. Be able
Mm,
to visualize and manifest where you want to be. So whenever something was going on, whether it was a hostage rescue, high value target assault, or maybe a contingency operation that we're doing, I've already visualized every possible outcome, and so that way, it's not when it does happen, when something does go wrong, it's not the first time I've seen it or thought about it, and at least I've solved a 90 or 80 to 90% of the problem before it's even happened. So that would be my treasure is to do some self talk and then block out any of the white noise, the naysayers, as I described early on when I said I wanted to be in special operations, and the guy said you wouldn't make it. That was a common theme throughout the rest of my career was people telling me I couldn't do something or I wouldn't amount up to it. And I was being told that by people who have never tried. Uh,
Mm,
so block out the white noise from the people who have never tried.
right. And when you think about it, I think that almost kind of pushes you forward, right?
Yeah,
Because the last thing you want to hear is negative talk like that, somebody telling you you can't do something.
yeah,
Well, okay, I'm just going to prove you wrong, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly,
So,
exactly. And some of these folks had no clue who I was or where I was from, and just made an assumption based off of what they saw in statistics. And so,
right,
fortunately, I had the determination and discipline to prove them wrong.
right. That's great. Um, okay, so this has been awesome, and I have to tell you, I really appreciate you sharing everything that you did, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and being open to sharing your journey and telling your story. Um, and I would ask another question: if you have any advice for fellow veterans that are struggling mentally, post service.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing I like to mention is for those that are in the darkness right now or go through that period of darkness, generally that decision to end it and to choose that decision that can never be taken back is made within a 5 second period. We just lost a teammate, former teammate of mine, about 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, to taking his own life. And nobody knew that
Ugh,
that was, a lot of people were within arm's reach kind of thing. They were talking to him almost
mhm.
daily. And
Yeah,
it was a very short time period. And it's a decision of 5 seconds, 5 seconds or less that, like, all right, I'm committing to this. And then they go through with it rather than take a second, take a deep breath, look through your phone and call up, somebody you haven't talked to in a while, text them.
right.
There's a lot of options out there. And there's people that care.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I've heard that a few times from other guests on my podcast that, the person is fine. They're in touch with people. People are talking to them. And then all of a sudden, they just take their own life. And
Mhm.
nobody knew. There were no signs. There were, and that's a shame
Yeah,
that happens that way.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm so sorry for your loss,
Yeah.
Stephen.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Um, this has been amazing again. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. And you never know who's listening that just might need to hear the words that you've just spoken today on this podcast. Um, but before you go, can you tell us where people can find and connect with you, and where they can find out more information on Shields and Stripes and apply to the program or donate?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go onto our website, www.shieldsandstripes.org, all of our social media handles there on the top right. So if you do the social media thing, follow us on there, please. We do have a contact email address and a form to fill out, and then newsletter. We don't spam people's with you know a newsletter every week. We do it by quarter. So if you want to know what kind of events are popping up in your area or when the next program is starting, we do have a program scheduled for July and September in the Phoenix area. Um, please subscribe to that newsletter so you can keep up with that information.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That kind of brings up something. So your programs are a couple times a year, correct?
Yeah, so the last couple years has been two a year, and this year we've been able to raise enough funds to make three.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
So if people go on the website before July, they could possibly get um, tapped into that July program.
correct. Yeah, so we should be opening up our application window next week or the week after, and then that will open up the essentially the window for applications to go through, and then be able to go through the July or September program. We do recognize that it is. I mean, it's a heavy lift. It's a haul for some folks to step away from their daily life and their daily routine for 3 weeks, and that's a big
Right.
task. So we try to afford enough time for that individual to go through a screening process and then be selected and then be able to plan out for that.
Right, right. And here's another question that just popped into my head that I forgot to ask.
Yeah.
How many people can go through a program at one time?
Yeah, we typically do eight at a time.
Eight at a time. Okay.
Keep it to eight because of any larger numbers, you start to see two clicks type of form, and they start to separate. Uh,
Right,
or it's easy for an individual to isolate themselves and not be noticed. Uh,
right.
that eight number, for some reason, people know when they're not there.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
make it a point to make sure you are.
That's great. That's great. Stephen, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate everything that you shared. Hello, viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Tactical Treasures Podcast. We just finished up an amazing conversation with Stephen Nisbet, who served nearly 16 years in the Air Force as a special warfare pararescue man and is now the co-founder and president of Shields and Stripes, which is a registered 501c3 nationwide nonprofit organization dedicated to restoring the lives of veterans and first responders that was founded in North Carolina in 2021 by Air Force pararescue man veteran Stephen Nisbet and Air Force veteran occupational therapist Dr. Jennifer Byrne. The Shields and Stripes program is designed to restore the lives of our nation's veterans and first responders through a team-based, holistic approach to healing with a 3-week in-person and 9-week telehealth program. Therapies and modalities include individual and group mental health, physical therapy, occupational therapy, nutrition, strength and conditioning, yoga, mentor and support with our athlete advocates, and peer support. To learn more about the program, apply, and to donate, go to shieldsandstripes.org. Again, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, you can find Tactical Treasures podcast on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms, as well as American Grit and our dedicated YouTube channel. We are now airing on Reese Across America Radio on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you missed that, be sure to join us for the encore on Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can also find Reese Across America Radio on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app. We are also proud to share that our JDog Foundation is a Wreaths Across America sponsorship group. For each $17 Veterans Wreath you sponsor, $5 goes directly back to the JDog Foundation, whose mission is to prevent veteran suicide and heal veterans' mental health and PTSD. You can donate right now at reaceacrossamerica.org/JDog. Again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again on another podcast real soon. Bye-bye now.